Embroidery scissors are a must because they cut so precisely, especially with how time-consuming this hobby can be. This small detail makes a huge difference. There are several varieties of embroidery floss, however the most common is DMC, but it's not readily available to everyone, so whatever you have near you is probably going to be the best one for you. It won't make that much of a difference. However, DMC is just a bit more popular. And you are going to need bobbins to put the thread on. This will save you so much time as you won't have to worry about the thread being tangled in the skin that it was in. You can refill them by jotting down the number of the color, and so you just need to keep getting those. But if you don't want to use plastic and be environmentally friendly and also a bit cheaper, you can also use cardboard and just cut 2 slips on the top and it works just the same with no problem. You'll probably end up with a lot of bobbins no matter which you choose, especially if you buy threads. Sometimes you get bobbins with them. They are super convenient, small, and compacted, so they are worth it, and you are going to end up with so much thread because there are so many hues to things that you are going to be thankful for this. Fabric is your canvas, and just like you can paint on different mediums, you can also embroider on different fabrics. The most commonly used are linen, cotton, muslin, and tulle, but you can explore your options and see which one you like best. The only one I wouldn't recommend are the ones used for cross stitch as the holes are large. Embroidery hoops are your steering wheel for embroidery, and they come in different materials. These are wooden ones and they are my personal favorites. They keep everything nice and taut or tight, and overall I just prefer them to plastic. Even if you're embroidering on a shirt, this really helps to stabilize everything. Embroidery needles come in different sizes, but usually the bigger the eye, the bigger the hole. Keep this in mind for smaller projects. You'll want to use the small ones for small details. My personal favorite way to transfer a pattern is with Sulky's Fabri-Solvi. This is a water-soluble paper that you can put through your printer, and I really like this because with my pattern that I've made here, it has so many details that I wanted to make sure that it got into the fabric, and especially with dark fabric, it's really hard to use even a white pencil over it and get all those details, so this really helps. And once I'm done embroidering on top of that, it dissolves with water and it's like magic. So definitely my favorite ways to do it. However, you can also use an iron-on transfer pen. You're going to just transfer on a tracing paper, trace over the pattern, and then flip the paper onto the fabric and iron over it. It's as easy as that. The heat transfers the pen to this works well for white fabric only, and the pen is a bit thick, so do keep that in mind. If you're trying to go for smaller details, it might not be the best option. And of course, you can't go wrong with the good old tracing method with tracing paper. I like to use charcoal pencils and trace over the pattern. Your pencil will have to be sharpened a few times if it's a big project, because you want the pencil to be sharp so that it really goes into the paper, so that when you flip the paper over onto the fabric, you can put pressure on all of the lines and it will go into the fabric. Now this again only works for light colored fabrics, but it's a great method if you don't have any of the other options. This method does take a lot of strength though. You might have to use the back end of scissors to really get the charcoal into the fabric, but it's cheaper than the rest. So now that you have everything that you need, you can actually start embroidery. Once you have your pattern on your fabric, or you're just getting ready to just do anything on a blank canvas, you're going to use the bottom half of the hoop to put the fabric over. And then once you have it in a place that you like, where everything is centered and framed where you want it to be, even if it's not going to stay in the hoop forever, then you can put the top half over. Now make sure that the screw is where you want it to be. I have the tendency to forget to put it on the top, right at the top, so that it is centered. And so you want to make sure that you do keep that in mind, because then you'll just have to start again because it won't look good. So make sure you know the screws where you want it to be, and then place it over and tighten and adjust the screws so that it is so tight that it sounds like a drum. You really want it to be solid and sturdy. And a really easy way to make sure that it is as tight as it can be is to use both of your fingers instead of just one like I'm doing here. It's much harder to pull, and so using both of your fingers to go in the same direction will help, and it will be solid as an object that is solid. I can't think of a comparison right now. If you have an excessive amount of fabric, you can choose to cut it. I know some people like to save it for the end and close in the back because they don't want to see the back stitches, but it's all up to you. It's up to your personal preference, and whatever is most aesthetically pleasing to you will be the best option for you. Threading a needle can throw some people off from this hobby, so I want to make it the easiest that I can and also the most efficient way. Now, when you're starting, you probably want to get used to the ones with the bigger eye or the hole of the needle. This will just get you used to putting the thread in the hole, and then you can challenge yourself and go smaller, because you will end up using small needles as well. And so now, although embroidery floss looks like it comes in one strand, it's actually one thick strand that divides into 6. Now in embroidery, the maximum amount of strands you'll want to use at a time is 6, but the lower numbers are often more used and more efficient for pieces. Before you can begin taking out individual strands, you will need to cut the whole line of 6. Now a good length is from your hand to your elbow. That's usually a good length so things don't get tangled or messy in your way. It's just a good measurement. You can go longer. I sometimes go longer too. But for this pattern, I will be using 2 strands. Now you do not want to pull 2 at a time or more at a time. You want to pull each thread, no matter how much you're using, individually, because you will end up with a tangled mess. You're just going to hold on to one and pull it up, and you will see the magic of it winding and rewinding down, and you got your individual piece of thread. So it looks like it's going to be a tangled mess, but it's actually not. And it's very important that you only pull one, because it will knot and you will have so much frustration with getting it out. It's just annoying. So save yourself the time. Just take it out individually. But that being said, when you're going to put it through the eye of the needle, if you're having trouble, you can lick the end so that it's more stuck together and not fraying. I do that, and it's honestly a lifesaver, and it gets the job done. So you can do that. Now, I know a lot of people do a fold in half, and if I was using 1 strand and I wanted 2, I could use 1 and fold it in half. However, this does make that strand shorter, and overall, when I begin embroidering, it's going to finish so quickly and I'll have to thread another needle. So what I like to do is to tie a knot on both ends of the strand. Obviously, when it's through the eye of the needle, you're going to tie one end and then go all the way to the other tail end and tie that end. It sounds a little confusing, but you're just basically tying knots on both ends of the strand so that the needle can't go through either side. And of course, you are going to want the needle to stay close to one knot, so that will be your part that you pull up. And this will all make sense when I am pulling it through the hoop, which I will show you. And everyone has their own way of tying their knots. I just simply wrap it around my finger, not completely, and loop the loose end in the middle to create the knot. When you start your hoop, finally, you want to start from the back, because this is where the knot that you created will stay. So you don't want that to show in front. So always start from the back and begin embroidering. And this technique that I'm using is just called thread painting. Now usually it's done with 1 strand, but for this video I will be doing 2 strands. And I'm not going to be doing this whole thing in this video, this was just a starter. However, if you do want to create this pattern with me, I will be making a series and I will give you a free PDF pattern in the description below and in the comments, so be sure to check that out and download it if you want to create this rabbit, pumpkin, book, mushroom, fall inspired hoop with me, and to just get a little idea of what thread painting is like. I also will be creating videos on different techniques that you can use, the more traditional techniques to make flowers and things like that, so do look out for those as well. But the more you do this, the more it will come to you, these little things that you have to focus on in the beginning very strictly, and then it just comes to you naturally in the end, like putting the needle right where I want it to be. I don't always get it, but I get the general idea where it should be, and you will too. And so it will become a faster process as you go on. Most of the techniques are easy to remember, and so as you go on, you will be able to use your imagination. So definitely don't worry about being slow in the beginning. Take your time. It will reward you. Once you see yourself running out of this strand that you're using, and I know in this scene I still have a lot of thread, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to end this long strand, but don't worry, I'll still use it later. I know there is a large debate on whether you should make knots in the back, but honestly, it's up to you. The back is not really something that people are going to see, so if you make knots and it's easy for you to do, and it's the easiest way for you to end your thread, do it. And it also makes things secure, so what I like doing is to take my needle and thread it through the strands that I've used in the past, and if I can, if the thread is still long enough, I try to make a loop and tie a knot. If not, usually there is a big amount of strands that I'm using, and this piece not so much, but you will be able to end pieces where you can just slip it through and just forget about it. So don't worry about making a knot in that case if you can't. And the last thing that I think is important to say when you are beginning embroidery is to not be intimidated by others and what people have created, and you're just starting. Everyone starts somewhere, and even the most simplest pieces make the most beautiful creations in the end. So don't compare yourself and don't worry about how many strands you're using and what techniques you're missing or could have done better. Just enjoy it, and if you see room for something you'd like to improve, then do it. My first embroider was this gerbil, and it's not as good as the large one I'm working on now of the dog, and I still have so much to do to improve, but even the most basic pieces are some of my favorite, like this one with the bee and dandelion. It's really simple, but it's honestly something I could look at forever and feel joy. So that's all for this video. I hope you guys found it helpful. Goodbye from me and Jiminy Cricket.